Batu, Marana, Nikto.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I'm joined by Julian Darius. Julian, how are you doing? You okay?
I'm doing great. Mr. 200.
Yes, this
How are
is
you?
indeed. I'm good. We are here to celebrate our bicentennial. We have done 200 episodes of Stories Out of Time and Space. So for those listening, I hope you've listened to all of them because there's going to be a quiz. No, we have got a lot to talk about in this episode, though. This is our wrap for season 5. We're going to talk about everything we've talked about on the main feed, and we are going to tip onto our Patreon exclusives, the ones we've done over there. But before we do that, there is something. Obviously, we are making changes. This is the end of season 5. We're coming up to the end of 2024 and moving into 2025. And Julian and I have been talking about what we want to do with the Patreon and with the main feed. And we're going to make a bit of a change because there's an awful lot of stuff that sat on the Patreon that some people have seen, others have not, but it's all good stuff. So the way we are going to do things going forward is the main feed will get everything, and that is basically sort of like main feed and Patreon. But everything that's going to be there will be on Patreon first. So it could be, I'm trying to think how far ahead. It's going to be quite far ahead, Patreon. There's going to be some good stuff on there, but you will get it on the main feed eventually.
Right.
So we're going to do...
It might be 6 months to a year, something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's exactly. And I love what you said that, nobody's missing anything. If you can't, afford to help out, you won't be missing anything. You'll be getting it all on the main feed. It just won't be as timely.
Yeah.
Right.
That's it.
And this also really helps us because not only does it encourage, us to keep the lights on at 20th Century Geek Plaza, but, it also streamlines things for us. So everything goes Patreon first, then onto the main feed.
That's it. And everyone gets it. Everyone gets it. And it's a nice sort of, not easy, but we get to record in an order. But what I'm saying is then, if you want some of this stuff early doors, if you want to be keeping up, with the Joneses, as it were, and helping us keep the lights on at 20th Century Plaza, we are more than grateful for you to go over to Patreon for $5 a month. You will still get pretty much everything, as well as all the back catalogue of not just Stories Out of Time and Space, but a whole bunch of stuff from 20th Century Geek as well.
Your 20-minute thoughts,
Yeah, 30-minute thoughts, and I've been doing sort of like I did some book reviews, and there's I've had some interviews on there I did with creators and stuff that I've sort of kept and that sort of thing. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff on there. All the Twilight Zone stuff as well. Like we've done up to season 1 on the main feed, but like up to the end of season 5 is now on Patreon, and we're going to do more stuff, and that'll all catch you up on here as well on the main feed. But it's all there now for just $5. Go. Or £5.
£5. Yeah.
£5. 5 of your English pound sterling. So yeah, that's enough for like one good cup of tea. That is. So go over there and check it out.
It's not even a coffee at Starbucks a month,
No.
And it really helps. And then you get everything, early. And this was,
and you can interact with us.
This was a difficult decision for us, but yeah. But I mean, this was, a difficult decision, but I think that, we do put a lot of time and effort into these.
We do.
And we really want to keep going. And this seemed the best way to make sure that, everybody got everything, but that, that we weren't excluding anyone, but that we also do want to continue to provide value for our patrons.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing. And there might be, I'll still do some stuff for there, because one of the other things you get on Patreon that you don't really get with the main feed is interaction. Like you can message us, you can ask questions, you can do other bits and pieces. So, go over there. There's always a link down in below of all these things. Just click on the link go check out 20th Century Geek. It's www.patreon.com/20cgmedia. But what we're going to do here, just to give you a very quick sort of upload. So yes, in order to create that Patreon first window, is we're not going away. So we're not going to disappear. I'm not going to be like, see you in 6 months. Like we're not going off. Basically, we're going to give you, there's still stuff to give. So there's been some things that we have done on Patreon. So over the last couple of seasons. So the things like THX 11484B, which was the inspiration for THX, the George Lucas film, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy TV show, Transformers G1 cartoon, Hard to Be a God, the German version, Battle Royale 2, Blade Runner for 2049 extras, some shorts, and then we're going to give you, going to join with our sister podcast, 20th Century Geek, we're going to do a review of the G.I. Joe movies, and they'll be on here. So that's what you're going to get, a bunch of stuff, and that's probably going to take us up to sort of March next year, and then we'll be looking at doing the RoboCop, all the RoboCop films, before we then get into season 6. So
don't forget we also have like 200 Twilight Zone episodes. So I'm exaggerating slightly, but we have an awful lot that we've done for Patreon. So there's a lot to give you guys on the main feed. But if you want to jump right into RoboCop and then season 6, we've got season 6 and 7 mapped out. So we've got big plans. This is not us taking a break or anything. If you want that stuff right away, get on the Patreon and look. We know times are tough, but remember it's $1 Starbucks a month.
Yeah, that's it. We need that caffeine to keep us going. So anyway, that's what's going to. So go and check it out again. Links down below. And if you want to ask questions about this on any of the social medias, come and find us. We're not on X, to be fair, because fuck that.
It's Nazi territory, frankly.
Yeah. So we have backed up on that. Us and the Guardian made a decision. We were better suited elsewhere. So
we did it jointly.
That's it, right? Yeah,
it was us and.
They came to see us. They wanted to, check against what we were doing. Anyway.
And we'll keep doing this until I'm put in a concentration camp.
Yeah.
For having said the things that I've said on this podcast, including this comment about X.
Yeah. Elon's listening. That's what it is. Anyway, we are going to let's jump into the main sort of body of today. We are here today to talk about the wrap up. Oh, you want to say something before we start?
Well, I just want to say again, this is our 200th episode.
It is.
We've done 200 of these crazy things, and we've covered so many movies. And this is really a great celebration of an ambitious season. I mean, this is our our second year-long season, but we've had even more bonus episodes and additional content, not to mention the alien interlude that we did. So we timed it so that this would be our 200th episode,
and it's worked well. I mean, yes, it's been psychologically damaging to do this many apocalypse films in a row, but I feel it has been worth it. Other thing to mention, actually, I will mention one more announcement before we move off this thing, is because it's our 200th episode, and Julian and I obviously so we have been working hard in the background doing a bunch of other things. We've made decisions around the Patreon. The other thing that we have coming up is a book, and so we are actually working on, through Julian's publication company Sequart, we are putting a book together. It's just going to be called Stories Out of Time and Space, the Essays Volume 1, pretty much. And Julian and I have picked films from the first 2 seasons, way back when. They're all on, the episodes are still there, and all those podcast catches. I think was it seasons 1, 2, and 3? Actually,
I think it's 3. Yeah, it's the first 3.
First 3 seasons. So we went back, we had a look at those, and we're each doing 6 essays on films and an essay each on Red Dwarf, and then some other contributing little bits and pieces as well. So it's a book of writings on our thoughts about those films that we've done. I've just been finished off John Carter. I'm doing Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, Quatermass in the Pit, and some others. And you're doing, I remember now, Dread, and
Transformers, Valerian.
Yes,
I'm going to redeem Valerian.
in defense of Valerian.
We're both writing about Red Dwarf.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, lots of good stuff.
So
Yeah, so
it's a good
we're in
collection.
the final stages.
We are. Yeah, we're just coming to the end of
We've
most of our
we've been
writing.
working on this for a while, so
Yeah, it's so we have been busy. So this is coming soon, and you'll see it on the socials and stuff. And we might even put sort of like some excerpts up in a sort of little sort of snippets within these episodes. But yeah, so be aware. Anyway, let's get into it. I always feel like the end piece. I'm always like ready to go. Thank you very much, goodbye. But we're not. Let's get started. So we are going to talk about our wrap of the second half of this season. And we'll probably touch on some of the early films, but we're going to be talking about Nausicaa and the Valley of the Wind, Delicatessen, Tank Girl, The Postman, Children of Men, and The Road. And then we're going to touch on the film Patreon exclusives that we did. The World of Flesh and the Devil, I Am Legend, Quatermass Conclusion. No, we talked about this, didn't we?
well, we talked about those in the first half.
But we're going to talk about When the Wind
second half
Blows. There
starts
we
with
go.
Threads, When the Wind Blows, How Comes
Threads.
to Frogtown, Six String Samurai, On the Beach,
and
the
Oblivion.
Australian version, and Oblivion. Not to mention I Am Legend, which
Yes.
we did out of sequence.
We did.
And I don't think we rated that on the first half because it was taking place chronologically later.
Yes. So let's get to that. So let's start with the main feed then. So we have Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, the Studio Ghibli anime from 1984. Let's start with scores, and then we'll go from there. So, Julian, what was your score for Nausicaa?
I give it a 6.
Oh, okay.
To me, it's good, but yeah, not it's fine. It has some issues. It's pretty to look at. It's hard for me to kind of recommend it.
Okay.
It's basically Dune in animated version. I would recommend it to somebody who was into anime and animated sci-fi, but I don't think I would recommend it to a general population. I take it you rated it slightly higher.
Only 6.5. So not hugely higher, but I agree with what you're saying about the general audience. Like it's a bit of a tough sell, I think, to many to people that would be like, oh, I'm into animated films. It's very much a sci-fi sort of anime film. But I liked a lot of the stuff that was in it. I really did. I think there's some cool stuff. I think it gets a little bit mixed up with some of its messaging at the end, about the sort of the savior stuff and the imagery of the sort of, walking through the fields and the blue coat and all that kind of stuff got a little weird towards the end. But I thought there was some really good stuff in it, like the designs of things. The animation is fantastic, and the sort of the stuff in the forest and that sort of stuff I thought was really good. So no, it was a win. I think that one for me. I think I watched it with my daughter. I watched it with Ellie, and she was kind of taken with it, which I think was a cool sign of, actually I think it's quite accessible for some younger people as an intro to, if they like that kind of thing. So, well, it's a good film. It's a solid sort of start, but not a classic.
And I always keep in mind 6 is Star Wars, right? So I've rated it as good as Star Wars. That's always my touchstone. Is like, is it as good or better than Star Wars or worse? So,
yeah, no, it's a film I'd go back to, and I think it's one I think in the future if I'm thinking, I wouldn't mind watching an anime kind of Ghibli film. It would be in consideration at least. But yeah, not a go-to, not an automatic go-to.
Yeah.
Anything else to say about Nausicaa? There's not.
No, I mean, I think we've covered it. I think it's a solid anime entry. I'm really glad that we were able to cover something by Miyazaki. And I think his influence is so important on anime and sort of popularizing anime. I mean, we've talked about Akira before, but Miyazaki does a lot of fantasy stuff, so there's not a lot that sort of fits our format. And so I'm really glad that we did address it. And I think that, his massive contribution to anime, even if I think his work is kind of overrated, frankly, compared to what other people do. It's still good.
Hmm.
Um, some of it's better than others, but it's still good, and I think it deserves attention and mention and discussion.
No, I agree. I think I'm a big proponent and fan of the sort of Studio Ghibli stuff and Miyazaki, and I think but I think I find we said this actually. We've met one of the things we will get to in the future is our Kurosawa stuff, and I think you one of the points you've made about Kurosawa is that he's almost like he's more famous or more lauded up outside of Japan than he is so in Japan. And so he's almost like an entry point. Like you start with that, and then you go, "I want to know more," and then you will learn more. And I find that sort of like Miyazaki is kind of the same. It's kind of like almost like a safe entry point. And I think all of his stuff is very good. I love My Neighbor Totoro and Spirited Away, and some of the Princess Mononoke and all those kinds of things. I think they're really good. But you're right. You can then go, "Cool, I've watched those. What else is there?" And it becomes like a bit of an entry point for others that you can be like, "Oh, cool, I'm now going to find out about that." So. Um, yeah,
We do have to do like an animated season at some point,
mm,
and just cover not necessarily more Miyazaki stuff, but cover more of the sort of like weird animated sci-fi stuff.
Space
Um,
Dandy. We need to cover episodes of Space Dandy.
I am the biggest fan of Space
Yeah.
Dandy. I adore it, but you're right. I mean, it's a little tougher entry point than say Spirited Away or something.
Hmm.
Where you can give the general population of America, Studio Ghibli movie and they'll like it fine. Um, Space Dandy might be a slightly harder sell. And I'm a huge fan of,
It's a
like the
raunchy Johnny
First
Bravo in space.
Macross.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we covered, the Netflix Cowboy Bebop,
Mm, mm.
but, we could cover that. We could cover, some other animated stuff. And of course, a bunch of American animated stuff. But some of that is a harder sell. Um,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. But no, I think I like this film. I think it's beautifully animated and obviously, there isn't a manga to go with it.
Hmm.
Okay, move on then.
You want
Moving
to
to
keep to the main feed. If you
yeah,
want to do the main feed first, we'd switch to 1991 Delicatessen.
Delicatessen. Yeah, I think about this film a lot. Um, in the weirdest ways, like there are just certain things that sort of pop in my head. I gave this a 7.5
Wow.
because it's one of those films that sort of I wasn't expecting to like or enjoy. I thought it was going to be. I was like, oh, okay, this is I'll see what happens. But it's really stuck with me. Not even like the story to an extent, like for what it's worth, but like this is one of those things where there's the visual style of it and some of the jokes and some of the bits and pieces where I'm just like, yeah, I could sit through that again. I'd like to go back and watch it almost like, experience it again in a much more sort of, I'm less with less of a critical eye, just sort of like just there to watch. Um, and I think it's kind of, it's one of those weird films, literally what we were just saying about Miyazaki or Kurosawa. Like having watched that, I'm kind of like, there may be some sort of like W.S. Anderson films I might enjoy. Like I might go and sort of watch, like Hotel Budapest or one of those things where I'm going like, I think that weird kind of aesthetic kind of works for me. I should probably give it more of a go. Um,
I'm
and so
gonna get
yeah,
you addicted to French movies. Yeah.
yeah, no, everything we've watched and when we've watched them, I'm always like, yeah, there's something really worth like seeing there. I like the visual style. I like the sort of the cynical humor of it. I liked some of the performances are good. Um, that yeah, no, I think it's a really solid film where I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't mind getting this on a nice crisp sort of special edition or something, and I'd watch it again. What about you?
Yeah. Um, well, we have a little bit of a discrepancy here, and it's interesting because it's a Frenchy movie, but I gave it a 6.25.
Oh, okay.
Uh, so for me, it's fine. It has some problems, with its plot. I don't think it is as charming as Amelie. I think it sort of like is going
Mm.
in that direction with
Mm.
weird characters and whatnot, but sort of doesn't quite work as well. Um, but it's still fascinating. I mean, I think that's sort of like 0.25 is style points, right?
Mm.
So
Hmm.
that's kind of like it's got its own style, it's doing something different, and it sticks in the memory for that. Its
Yes.
plot is a little daft, it's a little, tied down by, you know, um, money and budgets and sets and stuff. But it's uh it's good fun. It's got its own aesthetic. It's got its own style. I think, a lot of the comedic gags and just the characters really stand out.
Yes.
And I think it's got a life and a charm to it that sticks. And I think that is really what sticks with me more than even the story or the setting.
Yeah. Yes. I think it's both. It just sort of. I think I haven't seen Amelie in years. I watched that, I think, when it first came out. It was a bit of a hit internationally, wasn't it? And I've seen a couple of things with a similar aesthetic. I haven't really seen any Anderson films, but like there was a series of unfortunate events done on Netflix that clearly taps into this style and this kind of like weirdness. I really enjoyed that. But I do wonder if like if I'm giving it the 7.5 because I haven't dipped my toe enough into this sort of pool of these kinds of films. And if I was to see more and then reassess, would I sort of reduce my score, go like, oh, the benchmark has kind of shifted, as it were. I think the thing for me was though, watching this, it kind of made at least the first two-thirds of Alien Resurrection better. Like doing like watching this, and I'm like, oh, I get it now. Like I kind of understand like what he was doing with with Alien Resurrection. I kind of appreciate that more. I still think the ending of Alien Resurrection is dreadful and an absolute mess. But the aesthetic of the thing now, I'm like, oh, all right, I can see it now. I understand why it doesn't kind of fit with the rest of um the series, but like fair
Franchise.
play, yeah, like so. No, I just think that yeah, there was something about Delicatessen that has stuck with me. A charm, as you say, sort of like there's a I was quite enchanted by it.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I think it's interesting how that works for us or it doesn't.
Mm,
For me, like a lot of the Studio Ghibli stuff, people love because of its charm and its kind of,
mm,
just look, and its sort of ideas, animated. And I'm sort of like, I don't know how this world works. Delicatessen, I know how that world works. It's a weird world, right? I mean, it's a world filled with, you know, it's it's almost as if their oddball characters are accentuated by the post-apocalyptic setting.
yeah,
Like it's funny to me thinking about these movies as post-apocalyptic movies. Like Nausicaa basically uses the post-apocalyptic setting to tell a fantasy story with
mm,
sort of ecological themes. Um, but really, both of these movies are sort of post-apocalyptic light. Um,
yes,
like they don't really have anything to say about the apocalypse, right? That's really just stage dressing to tell the story that they want.
mm,
Um, but Delicatessen, is if it has any influence, it's sort of like it's letting these characters be weird and cannibals and, letting their personalities deform in isolation from other humans.
hmm,
Um, and so, its charm works for me, a little more personally.
yeah. I think for me, and that charm and that weirdness, especially with the characters and stuff. I think one of the things that sort of the connection I made in during the podcast and stuff, and even whilst I was watching it, was like the Gilliam connection as well. And I'm a fan of like Brazil and especially of like Baron Munchausen, and so there's that kind of weird off-kilter dream-like oddity that kind of that appeals to me from those as well, and I kind of sort of make that connection, and it's a growth of that. But this thing of like it being post-apocalypse and sort of like, especially with Delicatessen, as you say, like you never see anything, like everything's shrouded in fog, and you just see that one sort of set of buildings. Um, as you say, like I think that is part of why Delicatessen worked for me. Like Nausicaa was a bigger story. Like it was like, it was way into the future of post-apocalypse. There's been this thing, and now there's these creatures, and it's all you said. There's a connection with the balance of Earth and science and all that other stuff. But with Delicatessen, it was almost like, yeah, the world's ended, and we've kind of got some sort of system. But like, we're not going to tell you about what caused it. We're not going to tell you about what's going on in the rest of the world. Never mind the rest of the city. We're just going to focus in on this little dark, dingy place. And as you said, we're not going to comment on, what has happened or what that's done to people. It's just this. It's like you say, it's a sitcom. It's kind of like we've used that to sort of create this environment that we can have some weird little skits and stuff in as well. And yeah, I just enjoyed that. I thought that was cool.
There is something about the French charm. Like I was thinking about the difference between like the French are famously eccentric, right?
Mm.
And famously charming, right? The British are famously eccentric.
Mm.
But sort of like British eccentricity is kind of either milk toast, right?
Yep.
Or really dark,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And French eccentricity like kind of blurs those lines where, like a French eccentric serial killer is still perfectly charming.
Yes. Yeah.
Like you're like, oh yeah, I would be obligated to stop that person if I could, but he does speak French and enjoy his brie, So
Yeah.
there is this odd way in which now of course when you're living there it's different, right? You're annoyed by the people honking in the street or being
Hmm.
obnoxious or whatever. But there is a kind of like French eccentricity in which all of these traits just kind of merge together, and liking your old music is really, or eating your frogs in the basement is just kind of like one step away from cannibalism, and
Yeah.
it all sort of like has the same level. Whereas I feel like, in a British version, it's like, right, that guy who is odd and dresses weird and likes his tea a certain way, that's like that's all charming and normal. The fact that he's got corpses in his basement is dark and terrifying.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I actually think there's a film that really captures that from a British point. There's a film called Sightseers,
Hmm.
which is literally about a sort of a couple just getting together, and they go on a caravanning holiday, and it turns out that he's a serial killer. But it's incredibly British and polite about it, and it's just, but it's Ben Wheatley who did Kill List and A Field in England, that sort of thing. So it has that very much English eccentricity, and it's very funny and it's very very dark. But it's exactly as you say. It's kind of like, on the surface, everything is rosy and everyone's eating, drinking their Earl Grey, but there's also that chance that, he's going to beat you to death with a cricket bat. So, yeah, both fans of Delicatessen. Um, Other end of the spectrum, I fear now. Let's see how this goes. Moving forward a couple of years to the Australian outback, possibly. We have kangaroos, and we have Tank Girl. So what was your score
I
then for
gave
Tank
this a
Girl?
5.
Yeah, all right, that's fine. I think that's about right. I actually gave it a
So
5.5.
okay, interesting. Yeah, so again, we're sort of close.
Mm,
I mean, I'm tempted to go higher because I really admire the use of animated stuff. I really admire the kind of uh stripping down of continuity, along with the animated stuff. Um, there's also a sort of like punk aesthetic here. I'm a huge fan of the comics, but nothing works. You know, and there's so many, I know I'm weird, but there's so many just like basic cinematography problems with this film where, lack of establishing shots, stuff like that. I mean, the tube that they put people into,
the drowning tube. Yeah.
I mean, there's stuff in this that is so bad. And um so to me, it kind of evens out to a sort of like meh. I mean, for I want to give it like for its intent, I want to
Mhm.
give it like a 7.5, right?
Oh yeah.
For its achievement of that intent, it's more of a 4, you know? Um, and so it kind of unfortunately evens out to about a 5 for me.
No, I think that's fair. I think one of the key factors I always have when I look back on these and I give them a score is rewatchability. Like, will I sit back down and watch this again? And Tank Girl, like as you say, there's so much in it that's cool. Like the animation style, I love the fact that like the use of like comic panels at times to sort of express things. I think Laurie Petty's actually really good in it for vast portions of it. I think she's a precursor to sort of like the modern Harley Quinn. And I think we as we talked about, and there are some scenes where it's played really well, and it's done like with a sort of an anarchic kind of zaniness that works. Like you said, that punk aesthetic, but it's almost like a safe punk aesthetic. Like the comics are lot more aggressive in what they do, but the film's a little bit more tied down, but just enough. But then, like you said, but then there's whole sections that are just sort of are really bizarrely bad. Choices that are made, like the whole thing with what's his name, Malcolm McDowell's head being a hologram, and the fact that that's
Yeah.
like kept from you for like large portions of the film, but makes no impact because when you see him, it still looks like he's got a normal head. Like it's there's so many weird choices like that you just I don't understand why they did that. And then also, like you said, some of the editing of the action scenes towards the end are so bad that it makes Super Mario Brothers look well, like John Wick. Um, I just,
That's going to go on the back of the DVD.
um, it was the one that really bothered me was the parachuting in to at the end where she rides on like
Mm.
a parachute on the back of the tank and then sort of comes in and they open fire and she sort of opens fire, but it's clear that like Laurie Petty's not particularly happy with firing the gun, so she looks really uncomfortable and it looks so badly like it clearly is two completely filmed like different film sets like edited together and it just sort of like oh that just doesn't work. And there's also like some of the stuff with the kangaroos, whilst the
Yeah.
makeup and stuff is really cool, other stuff in it just makes no sense. Like they're a really dangerous lethal force when they're mysterious and then they become kind of inept and a little shit by the end of the film. So
Yeah, it's interesting that that same phenomenon is true to a lesser degree in Delicatessen, right?
hmm.
This idea of like there's a mysterious, dangerous force out there, and you meet them and they're kind of bumbling. Um, it's just that like in
But that's a joke.
Delicatessen,
We
they're
didn't tell
sort of
it.
weird and bumbling, but the
Yes.
kangaroos, you're like, what are they doing? Like
Yeah.
they're Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles talking about pizza. Like this is so over the top and not funny.
Yeah.
And it's stuff like, I mean, the raid on, even the raid on the house in the beginning,
Mm.
where it's just so illogically done. Tank Girl is, so badass, just murdering people, except they can't quite pull it off. And I don't think it's really Lori Petty. It's more the direction. It's more
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
cinematography. Look, I mean, if you can make, um, who's the guy who did Under Siege?
Steven Seagal.
Yeah, okay. If you can make old Steven Seagal look tolerable as a martial artist, you can make Lori Petty look like a badass killer with a machine gun. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
somehow that is not accomplished in any scene.
No.
And she's got attitude.
Mm.
She's doing a good performance. It's just yeah. This is one of those. I mean, I think we said it already, but I mean, it's one of those movies that I admire that they
Hmm.
did. I love the comics. This needs a remake. I want to like this movie. It just is more of a curiosity than it is a movie.
Yeah. It's what's funny is there's a film that we will never do. It came out at a similar time.
You say this, but
We may get to it. the acts as a counterpoint, and if we were to watch them back to back, I think you would like this more. And that film is Pamela Anderson's Barbed Wire,
Hmm.
which because I feel that, like, there's Tank Girl tries to play for like a feminist girl power audience. You know what I mean? It's kind of like,
Yeah.
I'm not here to be titillating and that sort of thing, like, but she's still kind of like, there's still that kind of attractiveness, but there's like it's irrelevant, like that she's, what she wears, and she's got a haircut certain way. And I think Laurie Petty sort of pulls it off in the best way. Like, I think you're right. I think if she was given better direction, I think she would have been. This could have been iconic. But like you say, but in contrast to that is the badass kind of Pamela Anderson in Barbed Wire, when it's still like, I'm going to be badass, but I'm also going to wear like high heels and stockings and leather. And you're like, all right, cool. None of that makes any sense and that sort of thing, but it's still going for a similar kind of rough biker aesthetic. And it's that, I mean, that film's a failure from top to bottom, but it's weird how, like, it's another thing that I admire in this, that at no point are they going like, oh, we're doing this for male
Titillation.
male titillation. Like, even
Yeah.
when it's kind of there, it's not like, it's kind of sort of, it's
Yeah.
done for different reasons. So I do have to admire it for certain things, but it kind of
Oh, I do
fails
too.
on a lot of
Yeah,
others.
there's no Michael Bay gratuitous ass shot, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to admire here. You know, yeah, I don't know. It's a curiosity. But I
Mm.
mean, the comics are so strong, and you think, especially in the wake of the sort of revitalization of the Mad Max franchise, you would think, maybe, maybe a TV series, maybe animated, I mean, Tank Girl is ripe for um,
Oh, this would
a
be an
sort of.
amazing animated series. Like, it's one of those. I don't know why Amazon or Netflix or one of those streamers hasn't picked this up and been like, we're doing an eight episode animated series, and it's going to be like, I think it would be awesome. So
And Tank Girl
yeah.
is such, we sort of pigeonholed her, but Tank Girl is such a unique character because she is a foul-mouthed
Mm,
feminist, unapologetic, foul-mouthed, dirty, sort
yeah.
of character, which is totally charming, but she's never mean.
Hmm.
And I think she's never bitter. She's never like a a stereotype of like an angry feminist, she's never angry. She just is irreverent and, doing her own thing. And I think that is such a great message, including for boys to see,
Mm.
but, also for women to see that, that you don't have to be prim and proper. You don't have to be polite. You can talk about bodily functions and be unapologetic about sex and, be a little dirty and have unique fashion and piercings and whatever the hell you want to do. But it totally avoids, and almost self-consciously so, any of the sort of like bitter,
Mm.
angry, stereotypes. Not all the men are going to be rapists, and like, you know. So I mean, it avoids all of that, and I think that provides a much more accessible approach to that kind of content than sort of like the Thelma and Louise model, which is a good movie, but I
Mm.
mean, you can do it once, right?
Yes.
And I love that. I love that aesthetic of Tank Girl. I love that sort of like, totally unapologetic, rude, crude. But at the same time, who can object to it, right? I mean, she's
Yeah.
just doing her thing. She doesn't hate on anybody, you know,
I can see
except
it.
assholes,
Yeah.
you know.
I can see it coming back. I mean, I honestly think, like, the 90s are coming back into fashion. I think, we're seeing a lot of that sort of thing come back into pop culture. It's ripe, like, absolutely ripe. Tank Girl is ripe for a revisit.
But the
Okay,
movie itself, not
not
so,
so much.
very
Yeah,
mad. Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. Character great, needs
Yeah,
more exposure. Not so much with the film.
idea's great. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
The
Another,
Postman,
another, yeah,
from
another.
one genius vision to the next.
Yeah. Um,
You got to start first with your rating here.
I do. Um, I really struggled over this one, to be fair,
I can tell.
because it's a real. So I give it a 6. Is what I'll say, because I recognize that there are so many problems with this film. It's longer than it needs to be. It's so schmaltzy, it's ridiculous. The ending is kind of silly. A lot of it's very silly. However, there is still something about this film that I really like, and I can't seem to decipher. I struggle to articulate it, and it's not just I like Kevin Costner. I think he's actually, he seems kind of miscast. I haven't read the book yet, but I have the book, and I've had a look through it and stuff. Oh wow, is like this. I was just reading a couple of pages in the middle. I just picked some bits and pieces at random, and I was like, huh, that film's kind of different to some of the stuff that's being discussed in this. So it definitely falls in that sort of sentimental and schmaltzy area. But it kind of works on something. There's so many bits in it that work. And when it's working, I feel it works well. And it does kind of slide into sort of like oddly mediocre territory again and again. But yeah, no, it just, this feels like it should have been. We will talk about On the Beach, which was an Australian and American joint venture 2-night movie event. The Postman feels like that. Like it should be like it's not a feature film. This feels like a 2-night,
Yeah, like a mini series,
like a mini series kind of thing. Like I can imagine it's being split in half and being over 2 nights and stuff like that. Like that's what it feels like. Having watched On the Beach, which we will talk about, I see that in this kind of like that's what this probably should have been. But I also see it as a passion project for Kevin Costner. So I kind of sort of the struggle for me in this isn't the good part, isn't the good guys. It is what's his name? Who plays the baddie? That's he's supposed to be sort of like almost like this Negan level character of sort of like and he's sort of like supposed to have full confidence in himself, and he was a former salesman or whatever, and now he's this sort of leader of this group of bros, this men group that's sort of taking over and all this other stuff. It's all led by strength, all this other stuff. And at no point do I ever really feel like he is, badass enough, or like he's going to have been the one that sort of got to the top of the tree for this group of people. He always feels a bit sort of like he feels a bit boring and plain when I feel like, if you've got Kevin Costner as your sort of lead for the heroes, you need someone. We said about it a little bit Dennis Hopper, kind of.
Will Patton?
Will Patton, thank you.
Yeah.
He's so kind of bland as that sort of bad guy that you need someone who's a little bit, going a little bit Dennis Hopper, but not the full Hopper. I don't need the full Hopper, but I need a little bit of mustache twirling, and also like
a little bit of crazy energy.
A little bit of crazy, yeah. I mean, the thing, just off before we started recording, we were talking about Bond, and one of the things we said about one of the type of Bond that you and I like is that Sean Connery, a little bit the same with Daniel Craig, or even the Timothy Dalton, where you're like, oh, he's smooth and suave and sophisticated, but you also get that he's going to kill someone. And he's
a little bit of a sociopath underneath,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's that edge, that danger. Yeah.
Yeah, you feel that like they can hold a conversation and they can be sort of like he can quote Shakespeare as he does in part of this film, but he's also willing to sort of ram a knife through someone's face if they need it.
Right.
And I don't feel that with Will Patton. I kind of feel like it's all bluster and hot air, and if someone was to sort of like blow a horn next to him, he'd really go "Ooh!" and run off. I don't know. That's the weak side for this film for me. Anyway. What's your score and your thoughts?
I gave this a 5.
Okay.
So we're I guess we're relatively close. A point off. I mean, for me, this is exactly the same score as Tank Girl.
Mm-hmm.
This is Matt. To me, I think there are things this movie does better, right? I mean, it is a better movie. It's better made. It's got an arc. I think, thinking about post-apocalyptic stuff, Tank Girl also uses the apocalypse as just an excuse for the setting, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's not any outside of just, the power and energy, company in the movie, there's not really a lot of logical outcome, from that apocalypse that really sets that scene or that tone. Um, I mean, when A Boy and His Dog does a better job of, really depicting a realistic results of the
Yeah.
apocalypse, you really don't give a shit. The Postman does a better job of that. And
Mm.
I want to highlight, to me, it's brought down by a lot of the things you mentioned. That Kevin Costner worship is ridiculous. Um, the plot sort of is good in places and then
Terrible in
really
others.
sideways, and yeah, just and kind of unfathomable ways. But I do want to give it credit for being one of the few movies that is about rebuilding.
Mm, mm.
And I really like, we were talking about some political stuff too before we started recording. And I said that I'm an institutionalist. I mean, as a young man, I was a bomb thrower, mentality, revolutionary, and I have totally morphed to an institutionalist. I believe in the institutions we have built and maintaining and reforming them where necessary. And there are a lot of reforms needed, but not tearing them down. I think that
Mm.
is a young man's mistake. That those institutions protect us.
Or an
And this
orange
is a
man's, or an
movie.
orange man's just mistake.
That's true. A petty narcissistic
Yeah.
would be dime store Stalin's mistake.
Yeah.
Um, you know, but I think that so I am a big fan of institutions, and I think this is a movie that's about an institution. It's
Mm.
about, the Postal Service and about connecting different areas and building up that infrastructure that creates civilization. And I think that is really intoxicating. That is really amazing. That should not work as a movie, and yet it really does.
Hmm.
Um, this movie deserves a lot of credit for that. Now, that's all based on the novel, right?
Yep.
That's all stuff from the novel, and then overlaid on that, you have poor directing choices. You have Kevin Costner needing to be the hero shot from an upward angle constantly. You have a lot of problems. But I would say, I mean, it's this is a movie that has a lot of good going for it. It's very ambitious in a totally different way than Tank Girl, but also has a lot of missteps. And so for me, that kind of evens out as a 5. And I would
Mm.
say, given this film's reputation, you know, as a bad movie, this is not a bad movie. It's
Mm.
meh to me.
Yeah.
It's not bad. It's not actually a poorly made movie. It has some poorly made elements, but it also has some good elements. And so for me, it kind of evens out at a 5.
Yeah. I like that what you said there about the rebuilding. This is about rebuilding. Unfortunately, it does end. I think it takes that to the extreme at the end of the film where it's like 10 years later and everyone's running boats and they've got a statue and stuff. I think that's all very ridiculous. But yeah, I agree. I like the sentiment of it.
Well,
Uh,
worse than the 10 years later is the, multiple like 1 month to 3 month gaps during the main
yes.
narrative in which like 10 years of stuff happens. This
People are
movie has a
very
super weird relationship with time.
yeah. People are very busy for periods of the time off screen in this film. Um, the final question really for the postman though, the most important question around this film. Is it better or worse than Waterworld?
Oh, that's interesting. Um, yeah, I don't know. What's your take on that?
I don't know because it's that thing of Waterworld again is overly long, has multiple cuts that get longer. It has lots of irrelevant stuff, but I have to admire the sort of the silliness of Waterworld. You have Dennis Hopper riding around on a on a massive tanker full of oil, doing crazy stuff with for his eye. I don't know. It's kind of like there's that, but I feel that this film, I feel The Postman works better as a whole and doesn't kind of like annoy me as much as Waterworld does.
Yes. I mean, I think there's stuff that I admire about Waterworld. I don't think it's as bad as people think.
Hmm.
So I'm looking back, and I rated Waterworld a 4, and I
Yeah.
rated this a 5, and you rated Waterworld a 5, and you rated this a 6.
Yeah.
So I think we both think this is a
Better
point
than
better than
Waterworld.
Waterworld.
Yeah, I think I'd stick with that.
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
Mm.
I think this holds together as a movie more. I think
Mm.
both are really ambitious. I think Waterworld is sort of even more so. Um, the Dennis Hopper, the whole Exxon Valdez thing is the best part of Waterworld.
It is.
Like the best part of Waterworld should be the hard scrabble looking quest for paradise, all of it. And instead, what works in Waterworld is the over-the-top B movie stuff,
Yeah.
which is not what the movie it wants to be.
No, Dennis Hopper driving around in a tanker in a Cadillac, giving away cigarettes and stuff like that is just,
That's
yeah,
the stuff that works, though.
it is. It is
And
brilliant. It's amazing, but it's not what, as you say, it's not what the film wants to be about.
yeah, and this movie could use a little bit more of that.
Yes, agreed. Anyway, right, let's jump forward 10 years to a film that less about the building, I don't know, but more about the decline, really.
Mm.
Children of Men from 2006. What are your thoughts and score then on this?
So this is so I gave this a 7.
Mm-hmm.
This is a good movie,
Mm.
right? Um, I think it's indisputable that this is a good movie,
Mm.
right? I mean, I'm not going to spend much time explaining why I didn't rate it lower. The performances are great, the plot basically works. The action sequences are stunning in some places.
Mm.
Um, the sets are amazing, but it doesn't stick in the memory. And it's ultimately not about anything. I think it's got these themes that are really deep, but at the end, those themes are window dressing for basically an action vehicle, right? And as you pointed out, like, I mean, the woman who can get pregnant and carry children is at least as important as the child she's birthed. There is some sort of like underlying misogyny there, or lack of really
Awareness.
having thought through what.
Awareness. I think there's just a lack of
Yeah.
awareness really about that. Yeah, yeah.
So for me, it's like this is a 7. This is good.
Mm.
It is not great. For me, it's definitely not an 8 because of those problems. That it really doesn't mean anything. You know what I mean? Like it has
Yeah,
these
no, no, no.
themes, but it's not about anything. I mean, it's like you could say it's about a heroic. I mean, really, it's about a heroic struggle and sacrifice, and that's great. And great performances. But that's not a theme, right? What is it about? I mean, it doesn't really have anything to say about children or, reproduction or, humanity's tie to these, animalistic, forces or aspects of our own nature or the xenophobia of Britain or anywhere else. I mean, those are all there, but they're all sort of like there as themes for the action vehicle.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Mm.
It just, means it doesn't like become greater than the sum of its parts for me. So again, I'm not going to say, I'm not going to spend much time saying I don't think anyone would watch this and say it's less than a 7. It's just too well done.
Mm.
But for me, those are the limiting factors that keep it from being really great. That's
I
just my
also
opinion.
I also gave it a 7. And I think for sort of similar reasons. I think this is an oddly beautiful looking film. I think, there was some things we talked about, like we've talked about the long tracking shots, and some of the cinematography, like especially the beginning with the coffee shop and the bombing and all that kind of stuff. Like, brilliantly well done, brilliantly well done. And there's some fantastic shots throughout the film. The sort of the in the car when they're being chased down and stuff, like the in-car filming, that brilliant, amazingly well done, absolutely effective. And even during the end, when they're in the sort of the camp, there's some shots there, some tracking shots, and some of the bits brilliantly well done. It looks fantastic. The technology and the sort of the directorial sort of like skill, brilliant. Can't fault it. Unfortunately, as you say, sort of there's parts of this that sort of like it's one of those films where I go like, oh yeah, that happened in it. Like the whole thing with like when he goes to get, and I think this is this comes to a little bit of what we were saying about the postman. It's very like this film's kind of dour, more not so dour, not as dour as we're gonna get, but like it's dour. Um, but every time it has like a flash of something that's kind of like a something else within this crazy world. Like this world's gone to shit. We know that there's no more children being born. The world's kind of like on a sort of a nihilistic bent. But it's not on a nihilistic bent. Like there's still sort of like bureaucracy. There's people still turning up to their jobs. There's people still doing things, but there is this sort of nihilistic underlining. But like it never sort of explores that in any kind of real way. Do you know what I mean? Like, um, I would want more to have a look at. Like he goes to meet the guy that's collecting the art or saving the art, and there's a joke there. It's like, well, who's this for? For what purpose? Like, why are you saving this art? And it's like, well, it really should be like a kind of like you do realize how pointless this is. Like what you're doing is pointless, but or but the opposite being like Michael Caine and his character sort of like basically I've disconnected from society and I now just get high and we live off the grid. Fine. But since I watched this, one of the things I thought about, and obviously you and I both read 2000 AD, and this felt like almost like a very 2000 AD kind of story, like, or if you were to give it the John Wagner spin or something from a Dreadworld spin, I'm like, okay, cool. Where are the people that are like, right now the only joy I've got is Boing, where I'm just going to throw myself off a building to see if I can survive. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, at the end of like on the beaches, there's that we on the beach. Sorry, we talk about that. There was the race where like they're just plowing into things and they're dying. It's almost like Death Race 2000 kind of style. Like although there's there's almost like it's like nihilism light in this where they talk about it, but I'm not being shown. You're not showing me what you're saying. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel there's a lot of that through the film because they also then talk about how evil the British government's being for holding this concentration camp and for all this other stuff. Yet when we go in there, they kind of show that all the refugees they're running and gunning. They've turned it into an absolute hole. And it's like then you have these religious people, sort of like these really stereotypical, like, Middle Eastern people firing guns in the air during a sort of a funeral and all this other stuff. And you're like, yeah, you're kind of batting
Undermining your social point. Yeah.
Yeah, you're kind of batting on both sides here, and that really starts to frustrate me. I'm just like, you need to either be a satire and start to have some of that stuff, or you need to be holding the line with your political beliefs. And I think I've come to the point that you said. I don't think this actually has any political. I don't think this has anything to say other than and I don't think I wouldn't even class this as an action movie. It's kind of like it's got some action bits in it, but like. It's a great film in the sense of I think it looks beautiful. I think the performances are good. I think there's some good intent here, but like I need this to be a real gut punch. This film should be a gut punch of a film, and it's not.
Yes.
It's a slap. It's a gentle slap in the face. This is Mike Tyson this is Mike Tyson gently punching Jake Paul in the face. That's what this is. It should be like this should be Tyson biting off Holyfield's ear. That's what this should be.
Yeah, this is somebody who's never done S&M before delivering their first slap.
Yes, exactly that. Yeah, yeah.
I laughed a little too hard at that. Yeah, no, I love what you're saying, and what you're saying, especially about the art, strikes me because the point there is really, isn't this an interesting little idea? And look at the cool visuals, right? Like this great art has been reduced to just being on somebody's wall. As society kind of falls apart. And it's really there just to be there. It's there for the visual. And I think about like how different this would be. Like, imagine if Denis Villeneuve directed that, right? Like, Blade Runner 2049 is in a much better universe than this. There's been multiple sort of like world ending kind of apocalyptic events, and yet society has gone on and technology has progressed despite that, and it's many years later, right? And yet if he shot something like that, you would have the loving multiple minute just kind of camera lingering on that art, on the frames, on the dust underneath those frames. and there would be lines, and in addition to the dialogue, the way it was shot would make you feel how futile this is.
Hmm.
Yeah, like this, and you would feel this sense of how we are art loving, aesthetic loving animals, and even in the wake of the apocalypse, even in the wake of possible doom for the species, likely doom for the species, we still care about preserving art, even though we know it's irrelevant. We would feel that paradox. We don't feel that paradox here. And I think what you say about like the Boeing thing, or the on the beach thing of the racing is a great point, right? That like this movie kind of goes 75% of the way, but it doesn't go that extra bit to really explore what would happen to the human psychology, or what do you have to say about human beings as a
Yeah.
species. And that's so much of what I love about science fiction, right? I mean, I love the action, I love, the spectacle, I love the beautiful spaceships and all the rest and ray guns, but I also love being able to say something deep and profound about humanity. And there's nothing deep and profound about humanity here.
No.
But it's a brilliantly done movie. I
Oh,
mean, it's
yes.
technically, on every technical level, this is hitting it out of the park.
Mm.
It's just on the thematic level, on the plot level, there are a few problems that we pointed out, but just there's nothing deeper here.
No, it's wonderfully rewatchable. I could sit and watch this, and I do feel that you get, because of the performance of Clive Owen, I do feel that the ending is a bit of is that slap, like it gives that bit of a slap at the end, and it's fine. But I do think, like, yeah, this could have been so much more. The potential is there for so much more. And the thing about the art, just before we get to the end, there's one thing about the apocalypse. I've read, there's a genre of, let's say, next world, a post-apocalypse. I'd say like Mad Max is this world. It's like we've passed through, and there's like the growing of a new culture, or growing of a new wild civilization. Even the Postman has got this thing of like, we're no longer this kind of big. We don't live in the cities, but we have this kind of back to basics kind of thing, right? Something's happened. There's a couple of books, and I forget the author now. I can't even tell you, but there's a film. There's a character called the Jerusalem Man, and it's kind of like a bit like Stephen King's the Gunslinger idea. I mean, the Gunslinger, Stephen King's sort of idea has this as well. This idea of traveling through a wasteland, and you have a character who is so distant from our culture that they will see something and go like that. Like in one of the books, the Jerusalem Man, like he comes across a fairground, and there's like it's partly buried and stuff, but the big wheels there and some of the bits. And he's sort of like, I wonder what this was for and what these did. And it's that thing of like, I can't tell. I have no idea. I have no reference point for what this is. But when he describes it, you can go like, oh, there's a Ferris wheel. Like I know what that is, but to him, it's so different. And I've always wondered about this kind of thing. To me, this thing of art, of putting it in a vault and protecting it. And I've always wanted to hear this idea of like, yeah, well, we might be going, but the Earth's going to be here, and there's potential for something else. And how cool would it be? As I don't know, it'd be millions of years, so probably wouldn't survive. But like this idea of like, there's going to be potential future species archaeologists that will come by and be like, we've dug up this vault, and it's full of these like daubs of things of like ballerina, like, there's women in like, or there's these figures in white fluffy dresses dancing around on their toes, or a pot of like yellow flowers. Like what were these? What
Was
did they
this a
represent?
religious ritual?
Yeah.
This dancing seems to be, highly formulaic. It seems like a religious ritual, right?
Yeah.
It's this kind of thing, yeah.
And we've never sort of that, and this was a scene where I'd be like, why are you doing it? Well, hopefully there'll be someone beyond us that can save or restore these. So, yeah, it just feels like it's not addressing or sort of trying to address or even poke at some of these ideas. They're just happening.
Yeah, I think that what you say is really profound, and I would settle for even just, well, I don't know that there are going to be humans alive on this planet in 70 years based on having no children, but this is what we do, right? I mean, there are a lot of things that we do. I think the older you get, the more you recognize that, like, I'm writing for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting in shape for myself. I mean, I'm never gonna win a marathon, right? Like, I'm never gonna, I'll probably never win a Nobel Prize, at this point. Um, get on that Nobel committee because you're really missing the ball. Um, but I do these things because I like to do them,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Because I'm alive and these are things that bring value and meaning to my life. And I'm aware that I am a chimpanzee who finds building this particular nest attractive.
yeah.
Um, but I don't pretend that it has any greater meaning. And I think that humans do that. I mean, whether it's, that could be tied to having children, right? That there are people who believe that it doesn't make sense to bring kids into the world, that the world is completely fucked. And yet,
Mm,
they still want to have a kid. You know, having a kid is uncertain. You're uncertain about the future. But it's not so much that it's an act of faith, it's just these are things that bring meaning and value to our lives and are meaningful to us,
mm,
and we will persist in doing those things even after they don't logically make any sense, because ultimately making great works of art was not about inspiring God to look down and say, wow, you have truly done something, humans. You are now worth saving, right? No, it was about the fact that we look at it and are aesthetically pleased and find
mm.
meaning in it. But
Take
that
joy in
meaning
it.
is confined to us. And,
Mm,
and this is a missed opportunity, even on that level, not even
mm.
going as deep as you're going to sort of explore what's the psychology here. And this
Yeah.
this movie is not interested in that.
No, and I do think that's a shame. I think that's what just definitely knocked some of the points off. Because, as you say, when I go back to it, it's like, oh yeah, there's some cool stuff in this, but it's like, yeah, some cool stuff. It's not. It's not hitting me in the way that some of these other films have done, and one we're going to talk about for the Patreon. Um, okay,
Still a good movie.
a good
I just
movie.
want to say, technically, I mean, some of those scenes, some of the action scenes are stunning.
Mm.
I will take them over a lot of so-called action movies any day. I mean, I just watched Deadpool and Wolverine. The action scenes in Children of Men are a million times better.
Yes, no,
You
the
know,
technical ability is the camera work is incredible. I think that's the
yeah.
direction is in the choreography of some of the scenes is phenomenally well done.
Yeah, there are
Um,
times watching this where you just go, I can't believe they did that. I cannot believe the camera's still going.
yeah,
I
yeah.
can't believe what I'm watching. Like, and that's saying a lot. So, I
Mm.
almost feel guilty not rating this higher, but I think we've
I think we've
elucidated
explained
why
why.
we
Yeah.
agree. Yeah.
So, the last one we got to was 2009,
A
and
masterpiece.
yeah, well, yeah, we traveled down uh, um, Cormac McCarthy's The Road. I suppose I've got to go first on this one. No, is it you? Is it me?
I think it's you.
It's me. All right. I had to, again. I went back and had to think about this because I think I went and had a look at reviews of other people, and it's one of those situations where I'm like, am I wrong? Obviously it's
Mhm.
subjective. Our reviews of what they are. I was like, am I
I
wrong?
don't think it's subjective. I think the two of us represent God's truth.
Yeah. All right. I gave this a 4.5. And one of the reasons the thing about this film for me is we've talked about rewatchability and we talked about other things and what does this film give you? First, I think this film is for me was a hard watch to begin with. I think it's a complete non-starter as a rewatch. Like I've got no interest in rewatching this film. It doesn't give me anything. Um I think it starts dour, ends dour, and I think what you learn is basically that it's all meaningless, which is fine as a message. But the fact is, it's sort of like the bits that were good in this are all the flashback bits, but it never kind of deals with anything. Um, And even like it kind of like we said, we compared this to The Walking Dead, and actually, well, actually, I think The Walking Dead deals with some of these things better than this film does. And whilst I'm a fan of The Walking Dead, I'm like, if you're not hitting that level with your feature, then you have a problem. Like the cannibals in this come across as silly. Some of the escape moments and some of the other bits are kind of like, I don't know. People, I saw reviews of people lauding this as a masterpiece, like a
Oh yeah.
heartbreaking masterpiece, and I'm like, I must be watching something completely different because I like you. I
No,
know you said you laughed at this film, but I'm just sort of sat going cross-eyed at like how like this film just doesn't work for me very well.
okay, so I think you were rating it a 4.5 because you feel guilty because everybody thinks it's a masterpiece.
Quite possibly,
I rated this a 3.
right?
I think this is objectively not just poor, but actually bad.
Mm,
And I say objectively because we pointed out just like objective problems with this movie. Um, if your entire point is to present a grim, hyper realistic, unflinching version of a post apocalyptic world, why does nobody try to survive? Why are people, why are people, there's no technology, there's no society built up, nothing anybody, he's
there's
got the
barely a
same
community.
one gun.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, nobody is behaving in a remotely logical way.
Hmm.
And so therefore this is not trying to present, if it is to be judged on its own merits, right, on how it wishes to be judged, which is a realistic and unflinching realistic look at a post-apocalyptic world, where we strip the Mad Max zaniness. There's nothing that's going. We're not going to be gathering gasoline for cars and all this kind of nonsense, right? This is the hard truth.
Mm.
That's how it wants to be judged. It is a total failure in that regard. I mean, and who does that fool? That fools people who are not thinking through the consequences and are just looking at the dour seriousness, the darkness of what's presented. Um, but again, yeah, those people, I mean, they might not be dumb overall, but they're dumb when it comes to evaluating this movie because they're seeing that superficial level, but they're not looking at the terms that this movie is setting up for its own reality and how it fails on such fundamental levels at its own terms.
Mm.
Uh, even that ending that undermines everything the movie has ever done.
It's so bad.
It's so, I mean,
Yeah.
it really is laughable. I mean, like, nothing in this movie makes any sense. I mean, there are things that I like say they strip the guy and, then can't find him again. There's a sort of like unresolved
Hmm.
embrace of ambiguity that I like about this movie. I don't mind that it's episodic. I don't mind that it's dark. Um, you know, but why are you following the road if, everybody is a cannibal and a killer, I mean, nothing about this movie makes sense on its own terms. And that's its problem for me.
Mm.
I don't mind the darkness. It's just, I keep coming back to that point we made talking about it, which is just, this feels like a 12-year-old boy's idea of, I'm going to make a movie that is an unflinching post-apocalyptic movie that just gets rid of all of the, we're not going to have any Exxon Valdez, in
Yeah.
this one, right?
Yeah.
But it's like hasn't thought through any of its ideas uh, in such a fundamental way. So yeah, I mean, I think this is just an objectively poorly done movie.
Mm. No, I think the fact that, like, for me, the crux of the big issue is that every time you get one of the flashbacks and you get like the decline of the mother played by Charlize Theron, and I'm going, I want this film. Forget all the road crap. I want to see the film where we have the apocalypse. You don't know what's caused it. It's just flame on the horizon. All the trees are burning and stuff. I want to see that mental breakdown of this family that results in her just walking off into the night and like that would have been much more interesting and much more sort of tragic and all this other stuff like than what we get. And I think that's where I'm like, oh, I have a problem if your flashbacks are what I want to see. That's kind of a real problem. So, yeah, I think I would say the other issue for me is I think Viggo Mortensen is good in this. I think he's given it his all. I think he gives a good performance. I think the boy
You
that
love
they
that
have,
kid.
I'd have shot him on that beach. I'd have been if I was Guy Pearce, I'd have just shot him and moved on. No, that whole thing, and maybe it's just me, but that kind of like Papa, Papa, and he just keeps like I would have drowned him and ate him and and been done with life. Like it's just, yeah, he's awful. Like he grates on me, and even now, in retrospect of talking about it, I'm like I hate him even more. Like he just winds me up.
Well, I agree with you about the flashbacks. I'm not as bothered by the kid as you are, by any means. But I agree with you that flashbacks are more interesting. And I just want to say, I'm not against a movie being dour and
Mm,
dark and unflinching. Imagine a movie that is the flashbacks that
mm.
ends with Viggo Mortensen killing the kid.
Yeah,
And either, maybe it's a mercy killing, he's like all is lost, like the kid is suffering, he kills the kid. And then, it's like, well, the kid's dead. I'm going to cannibalize his corpse,
yeah,
right? You know, I mean, and in the end, maybe he learns I shouldn't have done that, or there was a little bit of hope, or maybe, which is really where the movie goes at the end, or not. I'm totally fine with that movie. That would be a more interesting movie than what we get.
gotta say, for that ending, right? The film The Mist is better than The Road. So the film The Mist is based on the Stephen King short story, and it's very King in that like it has all of his tropes in it and all this other stuff. But it ends with spoilers. I'm going to spoil it, but it ends with the father having four bullets and five people in a car, or maybe even three and four people. I can't remember. But basically, there's all these animals or creatures crawling around the mist that kill people. And so he ends up killing three people in his car, let's say. One of them, his son, and then gets out the car for the creatures to kill him because there's like, that's it, the end of the world. There's nothing, there's no surviving this. Only for the mist to clear as the military turn up to start saving the day. And it's just him realizing that if he'd have waited like 2 minutes more, like he could have saved his son. And it's kind of a gut punch. No, it's not. It's a little bit cheesy in places, that film, but it's kind of what it's more unflinching in that ending in a Stephen King, horror actioner than this film. And so, yeah,
Yeah, even, that's a very good point and a very good comparison. Even these sequences that people laud, of this film, I mean, all the stuff that, I mean, I like the Fallout shelter, but they don't really need to leave it. I mean, nothing really makes that much sense. I mean, the house they infiltrate, I mean, even all of the sort of episodic sequences all have basic problems to them.
hmm
All don't make sense on their own levels, and unless you're fooled by it's dark,
yeah.
darker than dark, there's no this movie is just not a good movie.
This is Elon Musk saying, "I'm not MAGA, I'm dark goth MAGA." Like that's,
Yeah. But that's a level of maturity of this movie.
yeah,
I mean, I don't know. I cannot imagine anyone with a maturity level greater than a teenager who thinks this is, you know, really an examination of much of anything.
no. And I'm going to subside because just for our listeners and stuff, come at us, come on, tell us
Bring
what
it.
yeah, bring it. Like we've just called you a bunch of teenagers, goth teenagers. If you like this is one of the films in particular. I can't wrap. I read the reviews, I looked at it, and I can't understand it, and I'm curious to see what people think. And we could be wrong. Funny
No,
enough,
we're not wrong.
when
Absolutely
this
not.
yeah
This is why you rated it a 4.5 and I rated it a
yeah
3. We are not wrong. We are absolutely correct. Now, and if you want to talk about technical expertise, there's stuff that looks good in this movie.
Mm,
There are performances that are good. There are a couple ideas or interesting scenes. You were saying the flashbacks are good. I agree with everything you were saying. That's why it's a 3,
yeah.
right? And not a 0. Um, but I mean, Children of Men does a better job of all of that, frankly. Um, I mean, there were some really desolate landscapes in this that, they spent a lot of money looking, making things look really gray and, bleached out. Um, which is fine. I mean, it's an aesthetic, but I mean, even technical expertise is not enough
Mm,
to get you above a 7, and this is not as good a technical movie as Children of Men is,
no.
but it also just, I mean, I don't know when we got to the point where logical plots made no sense. Where logical plots did not matter for
Mm,
anyone. I mean, and we're failing on its own terms. At least, like Howard the Duck knows it's a silly movie.
yeah.
Howard the Duck is objectively a better movie than this. This
Mm,
movie has the same plot ridiculousness as Howard the Duck, except it is deadly serious about how realistic it thinks it's being.
hmm.
That's catastrophic in my
Yes.
mind.
No, no. Yeah, I agree. I think, yeah, and this system just fell. And, um,
So this is where we make the cup hands and invite
yeah,
people to come at us. Bring it.
yeah, that's it. Okay. So that is the main feed. That's what we've done for the
Mhm.
main feed. Now, before we get to, we're going to cover off our Patreon too. We'll probably run through those a little quicker. Now, for two reasons.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are Patreons. We will be putting those on the main feed. So I want to give the scores, but I don't want to wholly spoil all of our
Hmm.
thoughts on those films.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So we will run through them because there's some doozies, and I do want to comment on some of them and give our scores. But they will be, as we've said, coming onto the main feed. Patreon first, main feed second. So they will be on some point in the near future. But so I don't want to spoil it. So go listen to those, or join the Patreon and go listen to them now,
Amen.
which would be the preference. But let's go through them. So we will start in 1984 with Threads because we're going to sort of, we started the party with The Road, so let's continue the misery party with Threads, and we're going to go straight through to When the Wind Blows as well. So really are hitting the sort of the Hopperish mentality. What did you give Threads, and what are your thoughts?
Uh, I don't think you'll like this, but I gave it a 5.
Okay.
Um, I think it's inferior to The Day After. And
Hmm.
I had trouble really engaging. Even the stuff that I like, the sort of like TV news sequences and stuff, I just had trouble engaging. I admire what it's doing, but you know, would be hard pressed to recommend it.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, I can see, no, no, I actually matched it to my the day after score. So I'll give it a 7.5. And a lot of that comes down to the gut punch of it. I think it's well done. It's a very low budget TV film. But to talk about sort of the road being unflinching, and we talked about sort of, or Children of Men or one of those other things, I feel that this is, and I feel that the breakdown of how it presents um, the breakdown of bureaucracy, small town bureaucracy, as they're trapped in thingy, people making, forcibly making ridiculous choices, which will sort of this theme will follow on in When the Wind Blows. Like we can hide behind wooden doors stacked up against the wall and that kind of thing, or when the sun's blown up and you see his legs sort of sticking out the rubble, and there's some other, like the woman feeding the sort of burnt, breastfeeding the sort of the burnt corpse of her baby, and then other things that go on throughout the film. Like this film to me is it haunts me, this film, even now. I think there's a British element to it. We sort of talked about that, I do mention this idea of our blitz mentality and how we've responded to that. And so I do feel that this film carries a lot of that sensibility that is innately British, and not in a in a positive or negative way. Just it's how we would approach things. And I think we like to think that our bureaucracy, and we're good at that. We always going to queue up and do the right thing. And this film kind of forces us to know that no, we're actually kind of small-minded and bigoted. Like, the people get put into a house and go straight out the back door because they're being thrown out and that sort of thing. Like, there's really cool little moments in this about that. So to me, I think this is an important film from a British standpoint. And yeah, I just think I will. I don't think I'll go back to watch it any point soon, but I do think I would recommend this to people in the same way that I recommend. In fact, I'd partner it. Like The Day After and Threads should definitely be almost like a partner piece of mid 80s attitudes towards sort of like post nuclear war.
Sounds good.
Mm.
I mean, I think that's fair. I feel a little guilty for not rating this higher just because I know
No.
its place in British history.
Mm.
Um, I just feel that it's like more of a disconjointed series of scenes than it is a kind of engaging story for me. And I find myself
Yeah.
just asking questions like, what just happened? What's going on here?
Yeah.
But so I do feel guilty about that. But
No, I think it's fine. I think The Day After definitely presents a more, I would say, cohesive family drama. Like you're engaged with the characters more there. But I kind of like the chaos of Threads to be almost like as a counter to it. So yeah, okay. Next, keeping it cheerful and British is the animation When the Wind Blows. I read the graphic novel of this recently to see was there any variants. There's not. Like this film is almost like it's one of those situations where they've pretty much used the comic version as almost like story panels, and in wonderful ways. So I gave this a 6. In that I think it's again a good representation of sort of like kind of older British attitudes towards authority and to the rules and the idiocy of bureaucracy where they get conflicting rules in the pamphlets and also like gaslighting wives is definitely a big part of this. But I also think the use of animation in this, that 2D, that sort of hand drawn sort of 2D animation, the usage for different things like the dream sequences or the sort of the demonstration of things is brilliantly well done. But I also think it's dated, and I think there's some clunky moments in it as well. So, yeah, what are your thoughts?
I agree. I also gave this a 6.
Mm.
And I would say pretty much the same thing. I mean, I think it's even with a small runtime, it feels slow.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would say its biggest problem is sort of like I got it already. Yet another scene of like, but that is also kind of its point, right? It's just like, keep calm and carry on, even in the face of obvious demise.
Yeah.
And that kind of works, right? But
Mm.
it also
Mm.
kind of is boring. So I don't know. I mean, I think it does illustrate those things exceedingly well. It does kind of, given the fact that it's a little boring, it does kind of feel like a loss of animation time. Like, all this time is spent creating this animation with like rotating cameras and, like
3D
really
modeling.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, you have to admire it, but it's like, right. And what are you doing with those techniques? Is Neo dodging bullets on the roof? No, an elderly couple is having tea. Oh, right, that's a choice.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's fine. It's it's as good as Star Wars.
Yeah.
My
All right.
takeaway.
I'll take that. I'll take that. Um, okay. Slightly different pace. I think this is back to that sort of slightly different take on it being a setting. Um, Rowdy Roddy Piper joining us as we travel through to Frogtown. We have 1988. Hell Comes to Frogtown. What did you score this?
So I gave this a 5.75.
Mm.
And so for me, it's not Nausicaa, right? It's not as good as Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
But it's surprisingly close.
Mm.
And and I think that it is something that look, its first half is rough. Once it gets to
Mm.
Frogtown, man, like this picks up. The costumes are great. I mean, and it manages to be fun, in a in an admittedly sort of silly way. Um, but for the most part, it works. And I think like the comparison between this and Tank Girl, for
Mm.
example,
Mm.
is both kind of like over the top, both have, kangaroos or frogs, who are mutated or whatever. But this is the more successful one. And I really want to thank you for introducing me to it.
Yeah. Oh, you're very welcome. I gave this a 5, and I think I feel on this on a very sort of for the same reasons what you've said. I think I think this is kind of eh, it's got moments of really like when it hits high and it works and you're sort of they're utilizing Piper in the best way and the costumes are great and stuff like it's really good. Like it's really good. There's other moments though when sort of like the low budget is so abundantly clear that it kind of really damages it. But I also think some of the ideas in this are good, like the opening sequence with this little Statue of Liberty and some of the other stuff is fun. Um, but yeah, it kind of struggles and is clunky in other places. And I think, it's one of those. What this, I think I said it on the show, but what this evidence to me is like Piper's not a great actor, but he's a good performer. Like, he was good at promos and wrestling and stuff. So when you watch like They Live and you realize that like, oh, Carpenter got a pretty good performance out of Piper and as Nada and let him do stuff. Like you watch this and you're like, oh, he needs quite a steady hand to be sort of doing certain things to help him out in certain scenes. So it's good, it's fun. We off air we kind of sort of briefly talked about doing the sequels. We're not going to be doing the sequels. I checked part of one of them out. Like if we think this is low budget and crap, like they are a different level. There is no Piper, there's nobody. It's awful. It's almost like home camera level awful. Um, but yeah, no, this is fun. There's some fun moments, but it kind of like falls flunky. And I think it does have that same problems as Tank Girl as well. Okay, sticking with the weird and a different kind of way is um 10 years later, 1998, Six String Samurai. Um, I gave this a 4.5 in the sense of like, I really, really want this to be a good film. There's so much in this film that I'm like, this should be a cracking cult classic. Like this should be up there with Buckaroo Banzai, or even like Hell Comes to Frogtown, like one of those films that gets talked about as an underrated cult classic for being insanely weird, but having good moments in it. But it's so disjointed and so sort of almost incomprehensible as a premise as well as a plot that like despite some really good shots and some cool ideas um that I really like, that there's moments in this film I really really like, but then there's also other moments that are sort of like bafflingly weird to the extent of being distracting, like there's being chased by a van but going slowly and it's firing gobstoppers at them and then they're being run down, but like none of it feels like cohesive, and it's just yeah, it's has great ideas but doesn't hold anything together. I think that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything you're saying. But I rated it a 5.25.
Mm,
Yeah, I mean for me it's a little better than Tank Girl. Um, not as good as Hell Comes to Frogtown.
mm,
Um, I would agree with all of that. I guess that to me the sort of like samurai thing, there's a tradition of samurais and westerns kind of having a little less plot, right?
mm-hmm,
Having
mm-hmm.
a little bit of that sort of like Tarantino-esque, like this is just kind of happening. We don't know the backstory. admittedly, everything you say is true. Like none of these, there's illogical stuff here. There's stuff that does not make any sense. But it kind of works to me on a sort of like allegorical level.
Mm.
You know, kind of. It doesn't really, but as a just kind of like allegorical story that is almost not realistic, not interested in being realistic, I think that kind of saves it. I mean, if we're going to judge stuff by what it wants to be, right? So like the road wants to be hyper realistic and fails on its own terms. This wants to be fun and allegorical and you know comes in, succeeds at a medium level. So I think for what it is, it's kind of a 5.25 for me.
Yeah, that's fair. Oh, that's fair. I think more part of it is the disappointment that it's not better when I'm watching it and going like, there's so many cool like the representation of death in this film is really cool, and I'm like, cool. I want more of that, like solid ideas presented well, but it kind of just flops around a bit. Oh well. Okay. Another parallel one we did, so we obviously did the 1959 on the beach. So it'll be interesting to see where our scores compare on this. And then we obviously got the 2000, which was on the beach, which was an Australian and American joint venture for a TV movie, two-part miniseries. I at one point, I think when I said I've had to reflect on this, I gave the original a 7.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very concise. I think it's very good. And I wanted to sort of think about this, and I actually think at one point I thought, is this better? Is this better than the original? And that was where I was at, and that you and I sort of discussed it. It's not. I've decided. I gave this a 6.5. There's still a lot of really good stuff in this, but I struggle with the ending. That the end, that literally the last like 5 minutes of it, kind of makes a hash of certain things. And also there's several moments with especially Armand Assante that are kind of head scratching. But there's also some incredibly good things in this, and I think it carries a really good the sort of the forlorn hope of some of the people in this film is really sort of touching. So I think this is a good film, but I do think the original being more concise is actually a better representation of the story.
Yeah, for me, there's no question which is better.
Mm.
I like the original so much better than this. That's not to say that there aren't things that this is doing better. I mean, I think we talked about like those death scenes and the for me, I stick to my guns that without too many spoilers, that there's a death scene in this that's done where things are not shown in the original that are shown here, and it's very effective in both cases. And I would love to like teach a class in adaptation where this is put up as two examples of different approaches that both succeed on their own merits and illustrate advantages and disadvantages. Having said that, I think almost everything here is inferior to the original. Armand Assante is just mostly not good. The ending is catastrophic. The focus on the love story, drags on. There are interesting ideas here, like the solar powered computer that I kind of like, but that then open up another logical problem, So I don't know. I mean, I feel like the original is kind of a masterpiece for me. The original is like, my God, this is I rated the original an 8. So, for me, the original is like a underappreciated gem of sci-fi history. This is kind of like we're revisiting it. And we've redone Forbidden Planet as an Australian miniseries with more of a love story, and it has some interesting takes along the way, but ultimately, that's kind of how I feel.
I think it's quite obvious this is a TV movie, I think, isn't it? And it's kind of limited by that in many ways as well. Like the focus is definitely on the melodrama of it all, which it's got to be. I think one of the things that's interesting is about since I sometimes look at the marketing Like, how were these marketed to the audiences at the time? The 59 version is very much a sort of the tail end of those 50s sci-fi films. Like, they kind of wanted to sort of market it in the same way as one of those, but they knew they couldn't. So it's got that. It's much more about the tragedy. This one is all about the love story. Like, they are focused on that love triangle between the three sort of characters, and it's even sort of like, at the end of the world, there's hope in love and all this other stuff. So they clearly wanted to focus in on that's the selling point for this.
In a world where all hope has been lost,
Yeah,
you can still fall in love with Armando Sante.
and would you not just? I mean, that's but that's very much the marketing. So I think that as I went back, I was like, okay, that kind of tells me where this was at, and it's completely aligned to the direction of the production. Okay.
Well, I just want to say one of the real things that I don't like about this version is the Julian character. And not just because he's named Julian,
Yeah.
but he's so much deeper in the original. And he has a few advantages in this revised version, especially his relationship to Armand Sante and how he has an arc there. But I miss the racing scenes.
Yeah.
His death is terrible in this versus the original. The original feels like a gut punch, and this feels laughable.
It is the
I
CG
miss
flames.
the racing.
Yeah.
And him being part of the love triangle, is just overdone and melodramatic. And I feel like he's a much more interesting character and provides a kind of other perspective on how you deal with the end of the world in the original that I feel is utterly absent in the remake.
I think that's heavily where I think I disagree with you on that, because I actually found it's that thing of adaptation and variance. I like this version. There's a sort of they have him in contrast to the Armando Sante characters, who is all that duty and is very sort of straight laced, and the Julian character is way more sort of like he's the out there scientist who's going to speak his mind, which is kind of a cliche, but to me, I think I liked that polarizing sort of view of them from the different versions. But I would say I do want to just hit on this, and I'll talk about it when we sort of wrap up. But you're right. You said about this being an underappreciated, especially the original, the 59 version. Like, one of the things I've hit, we hit all the Mad Max films, and then we did some big ones. This is a genre that does not get enough love, and films like On the Beach, like the fact that it's never getting discussed, I don't see it in any sort of like, you'll see like post-apocalypse films, and it's always like Mad Max and Mad Max Light, and I feel that there's so many films in this that we just don't get talked about in that same sort of breath, which is bizarre to me. Anyway, to talk about another one that whether or not it should be talked about, we're going to go back to something we did a little bit earlier. But I Am Legend, 2007, Will Smith vehicle, and literally a Will Smith vehicle, because it's all about him. And we had Vincent Price in The Last Man on Earth, then we talked about Charlton Heston in The Omega Man, and then we talked about I Am Legend. And they are all different stories of the original Richard Matheson story, I Am Legend, of which I am a big fan. Like, I love the novel. I think the novel is fantastic. What are your thoughts on I Am Legend?
Did we talk about this at the mid-season wrap up? I
We
think
may have done. I think we may have done.
I think we both gave it a 5. At least I did, and I stand by that.
Yeah, I think I gave it a 6. So
okay,
it's still oddly almost like the less of the three. Like, I think the I Am Last Man on Earth is like is not a great. I like Vincent Price. It's not a great Vincent Price vehicle, but has some interesting things in it. And Omega Man, the first part of Omega Man is brilliant, and then it degenerates into a bit of a mess. But
I agree.
Okay.
There's stuff. I mean, the thing that I Am Legend with Will Smith has going for it is just the money, but it's a bad sign when the thing I remember most is you hitting a golf ball on an abandoned aircraft carrier.
Well,
like, that's I mean, it's got all of the like racing with the sports car and all of the sort of like, if Kevin Costner's got to be, shot from an upward angle, Will Smith is always heroic, and I can't stand this kind of stuff. I don't know.
I think all three of them, the one thing I'd say with all three of them that works the best part of all three of them is when it is main character in an isolated, on their own environment. Some of
Mhm.
those shots are brilliant in all three of them, and I think it works the best. And I think they say the opening of both the Omega Man and I Am Legend are really good for that. But I think it's a bit too CGI heavy in I Am Legend. But
And it's interesting. We said the same thing about the World of Flesh and the Devil, which is
mm,
not an I Am Legend adaptation. That when it's one person alone, it's usually a stronger film.
oh yeah,
Just watching everything they do becomes fascinating.
yes, yeah. No, it's an interesting sort of take. Okay, so jump into the last of our post-apocalyptic films. An interesting one from our standpoint. This is we've done a couple of Tom Cruise ones, but this is Oblivion from 2013. I don't know if we kind of split on this one.
I think we will be split. You want me to go first?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, go on.
I rated this a 4.
Oh, all right, okay.
So I think this is worse than a meh. I think this is, but it's not bad. It's sort of just poorly done. Um, and I talked to my brother about this recently, and he's a big fan,
Mm,
and I realized that fundamentally, like, I am a sci-fi person, my brother is an action person. So my brother is
mm-hmm.
like, right from the beginning, I'm sold, I'm going along with it. Like, there's one action sequence after another, and I'm like, yeah, but he downs a drone with a gun. And my brother's like, you can do that. And I'm like, yeah, if you get a lucky shot, but he's falling in a plane as he does it. Like, I don't know. I can't get over just how unlikable Tom Cruise is and how the movie does not know that he's just a Titanic asshole who, needs to die as painfully and as quickly as possible.
Um,
And,
that.
and, and as a sci-fi guy, none of those ideas are here, right? Like, if we criticize, like, Children of Men for kind of
Mhm.
having themes but not really exploring them, this does not have any interest in exploring them. It is hard for me to get over a sequence in which you have the Statue of Liberty's torch magically in a canyon. How the hell that happened, I don't know. But it's after the apocalypse, so who knows what happened with geology. So apparently, right off New York, everything, it's in a canyon, and yet that canyon terminates in skyscrapers that are on level with the bottom of the canyon. There's a waterfall. I mean, it's like, what the fuck? I don't even know what's going on in this movie, but it looks great.
Well, I think
That's all I can say.
no, I think this is the starting point. I gave this a 6, and I do think I lean into. I did weirdly. When I was considering the score for this, I was sort of again. I get that thing about rewatchability. I find this film quite rewatchable in that, like, it's not a deep film. I think it thinks it is. It wants to say, like, we've got this thing about clones and this thing of misconceptions about the da da da, and like, um unfortunately, I think that it also becomes a little bit silly. At the moment the human survivors come in, and you got Morgan Freeman like behind the battlements of a machine gun, and I'm kind of like, all right, cool. Like, Morgan Freeman's he's drank some of that Hopper
No,
Kool-Aid. Like,
yeah.
he's not gone the full Hopper, but there's a hint of Hopperishness about him in this film.
I took the paycheck and I'm gonna have fun. I mean, he's
100%.
Anthony Hopkins in Transformers: The Last Night.
Oh no, yeah. I mean, Anthony Hopkins goes full Hopper in that. I mean, I think that's what this is now called. Like, do they go Hopper? That's it. Um, and he does. I think he's doing that, isn't he? He's a bit, and Tom Cruise and the other cast are doing something slightly different. Um, the thing is, does it work as a sci-fi film? Not in the sense as you're saying. However, you make the point you made is like, yeah, but then you've got to forgive Planet of the Apes and the reveal at the end of that. Now, I understand that's part of the reveal, but it's the same thing. Like, how does the Statue of Liberty get to the coast or something like that? And I'm not saying that it's equivalent. But that's a consideration. But I think for me, this is a visually stunning film. I wouldn't say it's as technically good as Children of Men in the way that things are shot. I think the way things are shot is kind of not mundane, but it's kind of standard. But what they are shooting is beautiful, and they got lots of wide shots. I think the CGI in this is almost is stunningly well done, but I think it's stunningly well done because everything's flat and white, including Tom Cruise. But that's I think that adds to this sort of ability to do things in this film. Um, but yeah, I just think that there's some really good parts of this film. I think visually it looks great in places. I think some of the action works. I do think the story's a bit meh in that sense. It feels like it wants to be deeper. But the bit that loses points for me, and this is always, I think this is a problem for a lot of these films, is the end. And the moment, sort of like, everything that's on Earth is fine, but the moment they go to the Tet thing, and it's sort of like, talking to Sally, or whatever this alien consciousness is, and then Tom Cruise starts giving this speech that lasts about 5 minutes.
While the drones look on with machine guns, Gatling guns pointed at his head.
Which we've seen blow people away instantly and stuff in the past. Front and back and spinning and doing all kinds of bits and pieces. They're just sat waiting while he's sort of pontificating about whatever the hell he's talking about. Kind of, you're like, yeah, this is almost like in Tom Cruise's contract. Like he has to have this kind of. Do you know what I mean? Like it feels.
I must have a running scene. I must have my heroic exposition scene.
Exactly that kind of thing. Like just like The Rock can't lose a fight. Like this is the Tom Cruise equivalent, and it feels almost like it kind of grates towards the end and stuff. And you get the happy ending and stuff. Like but I like this film. But again, I think I've been affected by watching all of these films in a row. Do you know what I mean? Where I'm like, I think I would have rated this higher as a spectacle, as a blockbuster before, having watched all these post-apocalypse films where I'm like, no, these should have more clout and say something about the end of humanity, not just we're going to find a field and live in it, which is kind of what this says.
Yeah, I can't imagine rating this higher than a 6, personally. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, I think for you, you're right about that final speech and how illogical everything is about Tet. I mean, nothing about the setup of this movie makes any sense. Nothing about any of the scenes in this movie make any sense. It is that kind of like hollow spectacle where that epitomizes so much of what I hate about blockbuster movies, where it looks like you threw a lot of money at this, but the premise doesn't make sense. The scenes don't make sense on their own terms. It is almost an offense. It is an offense to me that there are starving people in the world and you spend $200 million on a movie like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to be.
I get what you're saying, and I agree on that sense. I would say that some of this was
script.
Yes, that's part of the problem. But yeah, I don't know. It just I can see the appeal of the spectacle.
No, and that's fine. And I will say, if this is on in the background as I'm working and kind of not paying attention, this is a great movie for that. Right? It kind of,
yes.
You can glance, you might hear a line of dialogue and glance over and be like, oh, this looks pretty good, right? Like, I don't know why they're doing what they're doing, but it looks great. And, I'll tune out and go back to whatever it is that I'm doing. This is a great movie for that. I can see watching it again, in that sense. It's just that if you are forced to watch it all the way through, then you realize, oh, there is no explanation for why they're doing what they're doing. It doesn't make any sense. There is no there. But imagine, you're right about that conclusion and how that kind of like grates on you from the Tom Cruise is the Messiah perspective.
Yeah.
Now imagine if that grated on you from the very first shot of Tom Cruise. That's my experience of this movie.
I have one other problem with this film that didn't strike me until after our conversation. We spoke about this. We literally covered this last weekend, and I was thinking about our conversation. We talked about this ending, right? And we talked about the other ending where they basically turn up at the hut, the shack, and they're all going to live happily around this body of water. One of the things that we learn from this film is that the Earth was attacked by this thing, the Tet, and at some point it attacked Earth, and like thousands and thousands of clones of Tom Cruise came running out of it, which even as a concept in and of itself is terrifying. Um, just running at you, all of them running at you, and intensely sort of. Anyway, one of the things that we find out is that the heart of this is a sort of an alien intelligence. This is the thing that Sally they refer to it as in this thing, right? But we never know what built it, what created it, if it's part of a wider, if it's an AI that's been sent by something else. But it's collecting the water and the resources of the Earth for a purpose, but we don't know what. You never really find out. They are told like they're being sent off Earth to something else. Let's be clear, them taking out the Tet or Sally at the end of this film has clearly sent a message to whatever the hell it is that sent the Tet in the first place, and they're coming straight back. So they've won this film, all right? They've won, they've brought down Sally. Coming in quick succession, I'm assuming, is an alien armada going, well, we better sort this out, and they're going to come straight back in like the next year. And everyone in this film is dead.
Yeah, I mean, that's true, and I like the AI,
Mm-hmm.
thing. I like the fact that there are things that are not explained. You're right that it's not a happy ending. This is one of the many movies where a wannabe happy ending is not really a happy ending,
Yeah.
but it's positioned as a happy ending. That's an excellent point. I would just add, there are lots of better places to get water than an inhabited planet.
Yeah.
We have
Pluto.
ice giants,
Yeah.
right? Look at Neptune, okay?
Yeah.
Like even within the solar system, what we're seeing of exoplanets suggests there are water worlds.
Yeah.
It is really easy to find ice planets, you know, not to mention, harvesting from asteroids
I was
or
gonna say they're just
space or
flying around. Yeah.
I mean, I mean, all these times where we see in these science fiction movies, like aliens are coming to Earth. Why are they coming here? Well, they're trying to get like minerals. And it's like, you do know that exists elsewhere outside of inhabited planets.
Yeah.
Like Earth is not alone in having water.
We're not
Earth
that.
is not
We are not
alone in
that
having
special.
iron.
Yeah, this
No,
rock
I
is
know.
not that special. Just go to another rock.
It's a
Yeah.
kind of anthropocentrism that, really irritates me.
Look.
But that's just one of the ways in which like this plot just
Yes.
does not make sense. It's not interested in making sense. Um, this is a movie that like looked at 2012 and said it made a lot of money. Can we be even glitzier and even stupider?
Yes.
How can we outstupid 2012? Because obviously audiences are not looking for brightness.
This is an interesting period. We talk about on the full show about how this is actually an interesting period in time of those sort of like high concept, relatively big budget sci-fi films that nobody remembers.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay.
Well, let's go back and just look at our ratings real quick. I just want to point out that I rated Oblivion lower than you rated any movie. You rated The Road a 4.5 for the second half, and I rated The Road a 3. You also rated Six String Samurai a 4.5, so those were your low marks for the second half. Your high mark was Threads, and my high mark at 7.5, and my high mark was Children of Men. But looking at the entire season, excluding Mad Max, I had Quatermass in the first half at 4, and Quatermass Conclusion and On the Beach at 8. So On the Beach is still my highest rated for the entire season. You had Last Battle at 3.5 is still your lowest rated for the entire season.
Yeah, I like
think you'd
some
stay
French.
by that.
I like some French films. I dislike other French films.
Well, you rated Delicatessen higher than I did, so
Yeah.
you can stand by that. And then you had The Day After at 7.5, which tied for Threads as your highest. But you had Fury Road at 8.5. It's interesting how much we both like the Mad Max movies. I had 3 Mad Max movies at 7.75. Now, thinking about that, the Mad Max set of movies accounted for, I had 3 at 7.75. The only one higher than that is On the Road. And you've got, Fury Road at 8.5, which
That's my
is
highest.
yeah, your highest. So
Yeah.
obviously, both of us, the Mad Max movies accounted for a disproportionate amount of our, highest ratings for the entire season. And so
Yeah.
I think this is interesting.
No, it is. I think, I think there's a reason that that became a franchise and has spawned different things. I think they work. And others haven't. But I think just looking at them, I think having done this over this period of time and done this many post-apocalypse films, including all the Mad Max films and stuff, some are hard to watch, and it does after a while become quite, you know, uh, relentless on the psyche. But one of the things I sort of look back on these is the way that through art, or at least through film, how we approach this concept of and it's not the end of the world. I want to. It's the end of humanity, the end of the human race, or the end of sort of like civilization. Is this sort of concept, and how we want to approach it as a human race. And there appears to be a couple of approaches. There is either like, right, things have gone to pot, so I'm strapping on some leather chaps, jumping on my beach buggy, and I'm off to go find Gussoline. And so there's basically like, world goes crazy. That's the one thing. That's your Mad Max, it's your Tank Girl, Six String Samurai, Hell Comes to Frogtown, right? There's the sort of like, even like the Postman a little bit. Like the world goes crazy. Like, you get glimpses of it. But it's all kind of it is kind of like almost nihilistic. It's kind of like one, that sort of everybody's going to be wearing, ridiculous clothes and driving around sort of broken down mechanical things.
And creating their own sort of like weird mini civilizations and
Yeah,
worshiping weird gods and,
that's
building
it.
weird stuff. And yeah.
Yes, smaller communities, isolation. Even like a boy and his dog, continues into this vein as well.
Mhm.
The others, I would say, is sort of the aiming for realism, but there's kind of like they want to be like weirdly hopeful in the face of absolute catastrophe. And I think like that is On the Beach, both versions of it, Children of Men, on the road, weirdly, um, you know, even like Silent Running a little bit, like, going to save the plants, we can, do those kind of things. Um, and then sort of, so there's those ones that sort of like, yes, it's all hope, but there's hope, or there's almost like not so much hope.
How do we survive?
Honor, yeah, there's honor in survival, or in something in the way that we survive. It's not about we haven't gone the full Mad Max. We've kept to ourselves and we've sort of met it in an honorable way, kind of thing.
And there's a kind of rebuilding
Mm,
there, right? Even if it's just surviving, in our small group, but there's a kind of wanting to rebuild some level of civilization, even if it's just ensuring your kid survives.
yeah, exactly. Even the world of Flesh and the Devil has that kind of, it wants to face up to a bit of bigotry and that kind of thing, but it's still got this idea of between these three people, they want to try and do something. The last one though is kind of like the ones that are the most real, where the last ones are like, we're gonna scare the shit out of you. Like, and to me that is really The Day After and Threads and When the Wind Blows, which is we are going to show you the everyday and then we're going to fuck it up. I mean, you are going to be terrified. We want to haunt your dreams, with this stuff. And it's kind of like, I mean, they were all designed as propaganda.
They're socially conscious in a way that the others aren't.
Yes. And it's that distance between, there's a distance between, I think, like the bawdy entertainment of the crazy and the, as you said, the socially conscious of the terrifying. And in between you have these sort of like different bubbles of what the apocalypse will be. Even like Delicatessen is kind of in the crazy. I think that's even in the crazy territory. It's not full Mad Max, but it's kind of like in this small group, this is the crazy that we inhabit. I don't know. I was just curious, sort of like what your thoughts on that, like these different approaches to the how we would survive or approach the end of the world or the end of civilization.
Well, I think you're looking at it from a human psychology perspective
Mm,
of sort of saying that some envision that our response to the apocalypse would be to go crazy and just, go in
yeah,
our own direction. Some would be sort of hope and carry on. Um, and what was the third group?
the terrifying, like the socially
Oh,
conscious, that sort of like yeah,
yeah. I mean, I guess, I think as a writer, like some use the apocalypse as backstory, kind of Nausicaa-like, right?
hmm
To sort of tell an unrelated story. I would say sort of, there's a gradation between these, and uh like if Nausicaa's on one end of that extreme, the Mad Max movies are on another,
hmm
which
hmm
is sort of like, yes, they're really about the assless chaps in the cars, right?
yeah,
Um, but they are they are at least more responding to the apocalypse, right? There's more post-apocalyptic psychology going on there than
hmm
there is in Nausicaa, right? Even though Nausicaa has a little bit of that social commentary too. Um, yeah, and I would say On the Beach is kind of in that social commentary category. Um, it sort of wants to position itself as a hopeful
mm.
movie, but ultimately it's a social commentary movie. It kind of tricks you. It kind of starts out as a hopeful movie and in the
The
end
the last
is
third is
a
yeah,
social commentary, right?
yeah.
Like this, look at what we're doing. In a way that still touches me and is devastating. So I think that there are these movies as a writer where the post about Tank Girl's like this, right? Where like Tank Girl is more on the Nausicaa side, where it's just
Hmm.
the apocalypse is an excuse to do what you want, right? And just have crazy fun. How Comes to Frogtown is like this. Then there are the sort of I mean, I would say like A Boy and His Dog is kind of in that category. Um, but then there are the sort of like more realistic examinations of an apocalypse. And those are kind of more the social commentary where the apocalypse is the point of the movie, right? Where it's not just window dressing, it's what the movie is fundamentally about. And I
hmm
and I think that interestingly, the ones that we like best, I mean, outside of On the Beach, uh, which I think is much more in that realistic category, um, the Mad Max movies are kind of at their best in between the two, where they're mostly a fun assless chaps in cars, but they also have enough of the thematic, response to tragedy, watching psychologies be distorted, stuff that it sort of leaves you with a feeling that it's greater than the sum of its parts
hmm.
or about something deeper.
No, it's great. I think looking at the thing is that this thing of story, this idea of, especially as we humans love story. We communicate through story, we track our history through story, we tell stories about ourselves and how we want to be seen. That's exactly what films are. And I do think you're right that there's these there's these different approaches. I think one of the things with the Mad Max, I think the really good point you make, mate, is the Mad Max kind of covers all bases. And when they're really good, I think it does that really well. The two that stand out, obviously, we said about Road Warrior and Fury Road, and I think both of those have
Well, and
that in a
Thunderdome, come on.
and
To
Thunderdome.
me, all three are,
Yeah, I think
those are the
Thunderdome.
three.
Yeah, and I think they do have everything you've just talked about. They have this element of social commentary. The structuring of social order. Um, Yet they fully understand that they're going to be entertaining and they're going to have like you know, um, crazy sort of chases and stunts or like characters that you're going to go like, wow, I think, Immortan Joe or Auntie Entity or like, Humongous, the villains are crazy and big, and but then you still get like the characters that sort of stand out, especially in Road Warrior, sort of the smaller stuff of the contract that Max is going to fill and all this other stuff is really interesting about human nature towards how they survive. But even more so than that, one of the things that sort of I liked that we touched on, and I may, when we get to writing about this, when we catch up in, say, in our essay book volume 2, is this idea as Max as a folk tale, like, the fact that Max may never have actually existed beyond the first film, and that all the tales in this are sort of disjointed and told as if sort of like from, as if Max is this sort of folk character. And it's all about story, and I think this thing of beyond the apocalypse, it takes us back as humans. It strips us of that civilization in the best possible way. And some of these, and we do tell these sort of folk stories of characters and stuff, and that's why I think Max works for so well for us. It's got all those bases. And so yeah, I love what you're saying about that. As sort of those different approaches. The other thing, just for me, just to sort of tack onto this, the reason when I look at The Day After and Threads in particular, is there's a twofold sort of thing for those as well. I call them they're the terrifying ones. They're propaganda, used to sort of socially conscious. But there's kind of like both of those were made for TV. They weren't feature films. These were TV movies. These were things made for television. All right.
Well, On the Beach, the remake, not the original.
No, sorry. I meant sorry. The Day After and Threads.
Oh, yeah.
I'm talking about those two. So The Day After and Threads, made for TV, as a response to the things like we said, like what's his face, Nicholas Meyer, who made The Day After, was like he made that to basically show the president to be like, "Oi, you got it." Like there was a purpose to that. But there's kind of like to me a ballsiness that like we said about the sort of the I'd say the beauty of say the On the Beach, the sort of doing that, but like TV at its best when it can be like we can do things that feature films can't. And I think these are kind of the things where I'm sort of like going, look, don't forget, TV can be incredibly powerful at times. And I think The Day After and Threads are these things where I'm going like, this was made by a TV company to be shown to like people. It was broadcast primed. They were broadcast on television.
It's designed to get ratings and sell advertisements, right?
Yeah,
you're showing, families choosing who lives and who dies and suffering from radiation burn. And it's like, after these messages, we'll be right back,
that's it.
Buy Crest toothpaste.
Exactly. Yeah. Buy your window cleaner, or here's some Heinz beans. Like it, I just think there's a bravery to those, and so whoever produced those and sort of said, and someone sat in a room and was like, "We're putting those on television at this time." I think well done, because it was the Threads. It was rebroadcast at Halloween this year. That tells you how. And it had a reaction. There were a lot of people that were like, "I've never seen this. I should watch this." The next day, people were like, "What the fuck have I just watched? Like, how did this come out 40 years ago?" And I think that shows how powerful these things are. So I think there's a bravery to them as well, which I kind of admire.
I do too.
That is important.
I want to say that the cinematic 1959 On the Beach is really the one that does that in movie audiences, and I think that that's to be commended too. I love what you're saying about TV. You're totally right. But it's interesting that, especially these days where movies have to make so much money to justify their existence, it's almost like they've become the much more conservative medium, whereas television might have been in earlier eras. The other thing I'd point out is that Silent Running is also in that sort of socially conscious category, that even though it takes place off of Earth, it is engaging in the apocalypse. And I think one of the things that really has haunted me this season, besides like, struggling psychologically with watching this batch of movies, over the course of a year, is how few of them really engage with the apocalypse, how few of them really have anything to say. And I think you're right that the Mad Max movies they're more entertaining than they are deep and a profound response to the apocalypse, but they at least engage with it somewhat, right?
Yes.
They do have something to say about stories and what would happen to human psychology. But really, if you look at this list, like the reason why we like The World, The Flesh, and the Devil, and the three adaptations of I Am Legend, um, we like the parts where it's a man alone, right?
Mm.
That's the part that's engaging with the apocalypse. When it becomes silly season and it becomes factions fighting, usually that starts to fall apart.
Yes.
Um, you know, when that becomes a vehicle for those kind of straddle the line of being a real apocalyptic movie, dealing with it, then going into silly season. It's amazing how many of these movies, given that this is the post-apocalyptic season, really have nothing to say about the apocalypse. The apocalypse is really just window dressing, starting with like a boy and his dog, and then going forward, like really the second half of the season is almost all window dressing. Um, have really very little interest in saying something about humanity. Um, and
Mm.
I think that's disappointing to me. I would like more post-apocalyptic movies that have something to say, that try to interrogate human nature. And I think that's so hard um, to do, right? I mean,
Mm.
it's not an easy sell, but that's such a obvious kind of situation in which to explore human nature. And so many of these movies fail to do it. And I think that kind of is a bit of a disappointment to me.
Yeah.
Not that I don't like the B movie schlock of, How Comes to Frogtown and stuff like that. And,
It has its
and the
place.
assless chaps and
Yeah.
cars
Yeah.
with spikes everywhere. I'm all good with all of that. I wish that there were more of that. And I think one of the things that's become clear to me is that the post-apocalyptic movie genre has largely failed to do what should be its central conceit or its central opportunity from
Mm.
a science fiction standpoint.
I think on that point, I think we'll sort of end on that point. It's been going quite a lot, but is we talked about The Walking Dead, and I think one of the things that Robert Kirkman wanted to achieve with The Walking Dead, and whether he achieved it or not is a matter of opinion, was he was always like, yeah, the zombie apocalypse happens, then his story begins. Like, what happens after? And as you say, it's not just a sort of like, and especially sort of there are seasons within The Walking. I think the tone is a little off balance at times. There is some seasons that are exactly that, where it's like we can utilize the zombie apocalypse for action, and I think that comes a bit later on. But that definitely does what you're sort of saying, isn't it? There are times when that series is able to sort of break it down and say, how do we engage with this? Like, what's the psychology now of the world is in, or society and humanity is in peril? Like, we've lost a massive sort of control. How do we deal with those things? And I think it sometimes can be very good at that. I think it dwindles into zombie action at times, but I think you're right. But I'd like to see that on, in a different way as well.
Well, and I think the Mad Max movies do something similar, I
Mm,
mean, and there, even if the point is basically it's Heart of Darkness, right? I mean,
yes.
it's like underneath our veil of civilization, how much of, underneath our veil of civilization, it's still survival of the fittest. You know, at the end of the day, the base level reality is the strong can impose their will on the
Hmm.
weak. Everything we've got as far as grocery stores and being nice to our neighbors and all of that we have because of affluence.
Yes.
um you know and I think that might not be the deepest message, but you can go a long way with that. And as you say, I think The Walking Dead does achieve that a lot of times, and it's amazing to me how little interest in even that level of observation there is in some of these movies.
Well, this is the battle between Anti Entity and Master Blaster in um, Thunderdome. You know,
Hmm.
and that's one of the reasons I love that film is because it does. You have Auntie Entity sat on high, thinking she's in control, but like, who controls Barter Town
Hmm.
is and so yeah. That, I mean, a massively underrated film. But yeah, I think this has been interesting. But I agree. I think there's a bleakness for bleakness sake in some of these films, and but I also think, like you say, it's a backdrop for other adventures that could just be another in a different environment. Like the apocalypse becomes, as you say, almost like an excuse or a justification or a setting for you to be going, right, civilization has collapsed. How do we what craziness can we put in there? And then it's insert crazy world rather than
Right.
why has that happened? Why did they get to that place?
And what does that mean for humanity, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's like you imagine somebody's got a cartoon of a character and they say this is, well, what's the world that's around this crazy cyborg character? Well, it's a post-apocalyptic wasteland,
Yeah.
That's as deep as it goes in some places, in some of these examples.
One we didn't do, because I don't know whether it'd be classed as science fiction or not. And it came to, I think we may have mentioned it at one point, is that's kind of sort of does something on this, but is Reign of Dragons. Or is it Reign of Fire with Matthew McConaughey, Christian Bale, and I forget who else is in it. But literally, it's a world taken over by dragons, and it's got societies like and then there's these dragon hunters, and it's very very silly, but it does kind of address this thing of like, how do we survive? How do we survive? But how do we ensure that, like, if we don't survive as an older generation, what do we pass on to our kids and that kind of stuff? Yeah, I'm not sure it's science fiction enough though. But I recommend it as a
Unless
film.
those dragons come from, another planet,
No,
it's
it's kind of like
fantasy.
no, yeah, it's more fancy. They're in the Earth, but but as a post-apocalypse fantasy film, it's kind of good fun. It has like a craze Matthew McConaughey jump off a helicopter with an axe to fight a dragon. So,
It's fun. I've never heard of it.
really, oh, okay,
Yeah.
go check it out. Like Reign of Fire. It's an interesting film. It's good fun. Anyway, right, I think we'll wrap up there. We've done a lot on the apocalypse. As you said, this is kind of, I don't sound like I'm apologizing. I'm not apologizing. You're getting a whole bunch of other stuff that was previously on Patreon. You're getting all the Patreon stuff now. We're going to give you a burst of Patreon content as we lead up now. You're going to get sort of the backlog is going to be on the main feed for quite some time, including the Twilight stuff. We've been holding off on it. It's been there for years. We've done it. We've done our full Twilight Zone
Original series.
original
all the
series.
episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus a bunch of the remakes.
Yeah, so what we're going to do is we will be going to almost like a weekly format, pretty much. So what we're going to do is you're going to get an episode of Backlog or Stories at Time and Space when we catch up, and then you're going to get Twilight Zone. So it's going to be, proper, I don't say proper episode, but like Stories at Time and Space, Twilight Zone,
Main
Stories at Time and
episode,
Space,
Twilight
main
Zone,
episode,
yeah.
Twilight Zone. Story, So you're going to get a bunch more stuff, starting with season 2, because season 1 has already been we did season 1 as a whole thing. So go back into the back catalogue of Stories at Time and Space, because the whole of season 1 of the Twilight Zone is there. So we're starting with season 2. We've got a whole bunch of episodes coming from that. And that's going to be starting soon, really, after this. So, lot of good stuff coming for you. Hopefully you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, tons of stuff. And if you want to get new stuff much faster, join the Patreon. But you won't be missing anything on the main feed. So, we really want you to
at least for
support the
this
show.
Yeah, because there's a whole bunch of other
that's true.
20th century geek
There's
stuff,
tons of other,
and there's other stuff,
tons.
and
also you really engage with people. You
we've been
really
doing some
pull them. You ask them what
we're
they wanna
doing.
do.
We've got there's some of the stuff I want to do. You might even get to see some glimpses of the essays before we publish them. You'll get to see the covers. We'll do stuff. We've got other books coming. So you will. There's lots of stuff on the Patreon. Go check it out if you're interested. Anyway, Julian, this has been a great season. I've really enjoyed.
200 episodes. 200 episodes down.
200 episodes, bicentennial. This is a real milestone for us. I think we've done, and I've loved doing this. It's been an amazing project. We've covered so much stuff.
It's been about 5 years. We've been doing this. 5 seasons, 5 years. We have not slacked off, and it's still fun. Despite the post-apocalyptic stuff. Can we figure out how the Care Bears movie is sci-fi after this season?
We can consider it. I think we've done Transformers. We're doing GI Joe. I'm pretty sure Care Bears comes into it in some way. There must be an alien species of some kind.
I just want something heartwarming and light, you know.
Yes. There are Garbage Pail Kids. That we have that film that was made. That's we, you know. There's.
Well, we've joked that we're going to be doing RoboCop next.
Oh,
you know,
RoboCop's we're doing, and
you know,
yeah.
on the Patreon. You know, RoboCop is going to be such a relief. It's going to feel like Care Bears after the road.
Especially the cartoon. Oh, we're going to do some of the cartoon episodes as well. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for everyone's support. We greatly appreciate all the comments and feedback and everything. And Julian, this has been wonderful, as I say. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And we shall see you on the next episode.
There's something very important I forgot to tell you.
What?
Don't cross the streams.